Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Urs Koenig joining us. Urs is an internationally renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, and a leading expert on humble leadership. And we're going to find out what that's all about. He's a former United Nations military peacekeeper and a NATO military peacekeeping commander. He's the author of Radical Humility, Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human. I'm thrilled to introduce Urs to you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy, for having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please tell our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
You mean in less than 30 minutes, Andy?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm a leadership guy. So I love leadership, and I just touched briefly on all the various stations and aspects of my career. So I loved leadership in academia. I actually am a geography PhD, believe it or not, way back. I loved leadership in management consulting, which I briefly did after my academic work, and as an ultra-endurance competitor as well. So I raced and competed in many very long races and led teams there to multiple wins and records. And then as a peacekeeper, you just mentioned that, I dig the getting stuff done through other people aspect, the leadership aspect. And then, in my personal life, I'm a dad of 2 teenage boys. Now that is the leadership challenge, if there ever was one. So I love leadership, all aspects, like to write, think, and talk about it. So that's my story in less than 30 minutes.
That's awesome, Urs. So my next question relates to the rocket booster moment, the key accelerant in your career. If you had to pick one event that was that key accelerant, what would it be?
It is a tough question, actually, because I think many of us have various ones. But if I had to pinpoint one, it was my decision at 28 to move from my home country, Switzerland, to Australia to write my PhD thesis in Australia, literally across the world. And so it was incredibly challenging because, I'm native Swiss German speaker. So I needed to establish myself in a different language, write the PhD thesis in a different language on a different continent. And yet it opened up so many opportunities for me, both immediately academically, but now, of course, through my life in terms of leadership and business, and just really, propelled me to be more of a citizen of the world, really. So that would be the one thing I have to pinpoint to one. And so ever since, by the way, I've been a Swiss abroad. So I lived abroad away from Switzerland since 28, yeah.
Nice. So your time in Australia, what university and where were you?
I was in Canberra at the Australian National University, and then I did a postdoc at the University of Melbourne, and then I did my MBA actually at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. So I've been different places.
Yeah, I asked the question because I too had some very transformative experiences in Australia working with my business partners there. I found it to be a really progressive, interesting place to be. Everybody's always moving and shaking and getting things done. It's if it wasn't so darn far away, I'd be visiting more often. That's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, I loved it too.
Yeah. So let's start the conversation with your time at the United Nations. What's one thing that most listeners don't know about what it means to be a UN peacekeeper?
Well, lots of people don't know much about peacekeeping at all, frankly.
Right.
But maybe, what? Now it has become part of my brand. So I'm a former UN peacekeeper, and it's interesting, and people are always intrigued by it. But much like so many things in life, there's a lot of behind the scenes grunt work that goes into it. And because this is the military, like literally, I'm an officer, I don't know how many bathrooms I've cleaned on these missions. So, ranging from that to, doing an analyst's work, basically. And so there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that is not very glamorous. And, you don't feel you move the needle much in terms of world peace. And so lots of behind the scenes stuff. So that's one on a sort of a personal level, which comes with the territory, right? We just have to be okay with that. Another thing that people often do not know is that peacekeepers actually, depending on the mission, can also enforce peace. So there is actually a whole battalion of attack helicopters that was stationed in Sudan, and they fly attacks under the UN flag. And people often do not know that. So this is not to go into too much detail, but after Srebrenica and Rwanda, where peacekeepers were literally in eyesight from genocide happening, the UN went, we need to change something. We need to be more proactive. We can't just observe and monitor and report. And so peacekeepers now actually can also, depending on the mission, enforce peace with force if needed.
I also did not know that. So thank you. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So I want to start with your book, Radical Humility. Can you tell us more about your path to writing the book and more importantly, adopting the concept of humility as your foundational message?
Andy, I've always been drawn to humility as a personal trait in people. So in my ultra endurance competitive life, the competitors who let their legs do the talking versus the big mouth. So on a personal level, I always, in business too, you and I have come across amazing leaders, so successful, and they still deploy a growth mindset. What can I learn from this? How can I get better versus sitting on their laurels? So I was always drawn on a personal level to that. But frankly, I didn't really study humility as a desirable leadership trait with any seriousness. But then in about 2008, 9, 10, we came out of the financial crisis, social media started to explode, everything started to move faster. And a lot of my executive coaching clients always felt that they were a step behind. And a lot of them were still leading very much top-down command control, transactional leadership. And so that sort of, for the first time, really got me thinking, okay, there must be another way. And of course, transformational leadership has been around, servant leadership has been around. And then the groundbreaking book, Humble Leadership by Ed and Peter Schein was published. And that really got my attention. And then I started to study it. And then when I went back into the military for my first peacekeeping mission in the NATO mission in the Balkans, counterintuitively, going back into the military, I found that the best commanders I had were actually deeply humble leaders. They built collaborative relationships, they built psychological safety, they deployed a growth mindset. So I was actually blown away going back into the military. Oh, there's this humble leadership thing that, academics have been talking about, some business leaders have applied, but here it is living in the military. So when I came back from my second mission, from the Middle East 2 years ago, I dug in, 3 years ago now, I dug in and started to really research in systematically what humility can do for leadership. And so the outcome of that research, of that quest, is of course the book that I just published.
That's wonderful. And I'm going to hold up the book for our YouTube viewers. I love the cover. I love the title. Little light swearing is never a bad thing. Be a badass leader, catch the attention. What's the most important misconception that you encounter in your clients when you're explaining the concept of humility?
What often comes back, unsurprisingly, is like, okay, if I'm humble, I'm going to be a pushover. I'm not going to be assertive. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So I actually talk about these myths I'm dismantling in the book. So, for example, being confident and humble actually go hand in hand. So if I think about it, I need to be fundamentally confident in myself, Andy. I need to have a strong sense of self to humbly ask my teammates for feedback. What can I do better as your manager? What are the things I need to improve? Only if I fundamentally am confident in myself can I actually lean out the window a bit and ask humbly these questions. And so rather than be a contradiction, I actually fundamentally believe in order to show up with true humility, I need to be actually fundamentally confident. So that is maybe the biggest misconception that folks have. And so you and I have come across people who, cover up their insecurities with arrogance, right? And so that would be the opposite. So that's probably the biggest misconception.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is really the difference between big ego, weak ego, and strong ego.
Yeah.
Strong ego meaning I'm able to check myself. I'm still very confident in myself, but I have the tools and the skills internally to know when I'm pushing too far or being too self-centered in whatever I'm doing. Am I getting that right?
You should have written the book. You put it perfectly. No, I love it. No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's having an accurate view of myself. Like one of the shifts I talk about in the book is dig deep. Accurate self-awareness, like real self-awareness. And by the way, being humble doesn't mean that I see myself lower than what I really am. And so it doesn't mean being arrogant, but it also doesn't mean that I have low self-esteem. I see myself accurately. And that, then we can talk about more what it exactly means. But that means that I go out and ask people around me for how I'm coming across. What am I doing well? What can I do better? Humbly always ask.
Yeah. I've been through marriage counseling with my wife on a number of occasions, and it's really strengthened our relationship. But the wonderful thing about that is there are lessons for business to be a great leader, and especially the lesson of humility, that it's not all about you, that it's about the team of you and your spouse working together, communicating effectively. And all of these lessons are lessons that we can apply in the world of work. So, whenever I have conversations like this, I go back to our marriage counseling and all the wonderful lessons that I learned there.
Yeah, that is wonderful, Andy, and thank you for sharing. Right, we cannot be a different person at work and at home. Sure, we show different facets, maybe, but when push comes to shove, when the stress is on, we all fall back into our MO, and so it's a lot of the things we also do in leadership development, as you well know, actually benefit us in our personal life. And you're just describing the other way, right? So that personal work really shows up in my performance at work as well. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back to continue our conversation about humble leadership. Hey, it's Andy here. I've got a new podcast I'd like to introduce you to, The Saturday Morning Muse. Start your weekend with me by exploring topics that span leadership, business management, education, and other musings that are designed to support your journey of personal and professional continuous improvement. Subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. And we're back with Urs Koenig talking about humble leadership. Let's dig into radical humility. I'm going to hold the book up again. Can you give us the 10,000-foot view of what you call the 5 shifts? And we've got to be really careful with saying that word. The 5 shifts that you ask leaders to make on their journey from what you call heroic leadership to humble leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah, so heroic leadership, old school, what I call old school top-down command control. The leader has all the answers, knows it all, knows best. And so the first shift is what I call dig deep. We just talked about self-awareness, so that's exactly that. See myself in line with how others see me. It also means having the humility to know that I can't do everything, but I can do almost anything if I put my mind to it. So this notion of focus, of stop doing list, of saying no. So that's the first shift. The second shift is very dear to my heart. This is one-on-one leadership, tough on results, tender on people, in line with the book title, Be a Badass Leader and a good human. So the notion that we either have to be a kind person or a tough leader really is a false dichotomy. So this is the ultimate yin-yang of humble leadership. The third shift is what I call lead like a compass. So instead of micromanaging, too involved in the weeds, giving my people a detailed map on how to go from where they are to where they need to be, I provide a compass, a true north compass by what I call shared purpose. So that's leading like a compass. And then the fourth shift is maybe for some of us the most difficult one, which is what I call leading with full transparency. And this is full transparency around, if I'm the manager or the leader, what's going on in the business, strategy, goals, metrics, but it also is full transparency around my challenges, my growth opportunities as a leader. So showing up with a bit of vulnerability around what I'm working on. So that's the fourth shift. And the last one is championing a fearless culture. So this is organization-wide leadership. How do I make it psychologically safe for my people to speak up with questions, concerns, crazy ideas without fear of being shamed or risking their career? So it goes from leading myself, self-awareness, all the way one-on-one leadership to organizational leadership, building a fearless culture.
Yeah, it's a wonderful structure. I love how the book is laid out, and I you and I have never met until today, and I feel like we were kind of on a very similar journey, because it was right around the time of the Great Recession, 2000, the real estate debacle here in the United States in 2007, and the financial crises that followed. That's where I personally made that shift in that recognition from the directive. Andy said, command and control. Nothing happened in the business without first going across my desk. Nobody was enabled, empowered. It was all about me. And then the depths of the Great Recession, realizing that, wow, there's got to be a different way. So let's, you talked about the most difficult of the 5 shifts being that kind of transparency, the fourth shift that you talked about. How do you coach folks to kind of give up that control and allow others in, especially people from other parts of the business that you might be either tacitly or really competing with for resources, et cetera? It's really hard for people to say, yeah, the problem's really over. The problem's here. It's not really over there. Most of us like to say, oh no, everything's fine here. Go look over there.
Right. So this is a huge question, and you're absolutely right. It's a tough one. But so I would start with something actually very personal, and you just demonstrated that beautifully, actually, Andy. So we can the quickest way to build trust with anybody, including your competitors, is actually to show up with a bit of vulnerability. And you just demonstrated that. You talked about marriage counseling, right? That's sharing with a bit of vulnerability. What does that do to me when I'm listening? I'm going, you know what? Andy's not perfect either. I have stuff I'm working on. So you become relatable. So, Brené Brown, and we don't have to talk about Brené Brown per se, but the queen of vulnerability and shame, she says, vulnerability is the last thing I want to show you, and it's the first thing I'm looking for in you. So to build connection. But, let's be real. Like we're living in the real world. It's no good opening every team meeting in tears and my parents never really loved me. Like, no. No, that's not what we're talking about. It's about getting at eye level with our teammates. And it's about saying, you know what? I'm not quite sure about this either. What do you think? Or even more powerful, share a meaningful goal of yours. So if I, as the leader, share what I'm working on, getting better, I have a little anecdote in the book. Brad Smith, the former CEO of Intuit, he did a 360 and shared his 360 report with the entire company. So he emailed his 360 to every single person in the company with a bit of vulnerability, right? He even taped it to his office door for everybody to see. So, and built huge trust, because you know what? If the CEO admits that he's not perfect and wants to get better, maybe I can do the same thing. And so sharing a personal goal, what I'm working on, demonstrates to my team members that, you know, he or she is work in progress. So we're all in this together. So that's one way to build trust very fast. So appropriate, adequate vulnerability comes first and trust second, not the other way around. And so there is actually one last piece on this. I quote a really interesting study in my book where pairs of complete strangers are brought into a lab and they're asked to respond or ask each other and respond to meaningful questions, such as, what does love and friendship mean to you? You know, if you only had 1 year to live, what would you change? Total strangers, after 45 minutes, they're asked to rate the level of trust they developed with a person of 45 minutes. They rated the level of trust about as high as the average level of trust they have with people in their lives. Some even as high as the level of trust they have with their significant others. And so the research is crystal clear. Even with the sharing with a bit of vulnerability is the quickest and most powerful way to build trust.
Yeah. So what do you do with that leader who just bristles against this concept of sharing and what I like to call implementing the concept of constructive vulnerability? So many folks just go, "Oh, it sounds like that sounds like a therapy session," and I'm not going there. What tools do you give folks like that to kind of crack open the mind just a bit?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would actually do, and depending on how the person is wired, like actually show them some data. Actually show them the data. So how is connection built? And actually even go back, like, what is it that you're trying to achieve, leader? What is it you're trying to achieve? Are you losing people in your team? Like, what's the pain point? Do you have retention issues? And then can we have some data why people are leaving your team? Maybe they're leaving because, they don't feel connected to you enough, because we know why people leave teams. They don't leave their coworkers. They don't leave uninteresting jobs. They leave because the boss is not where the boss needs to be. So first pain point, then show them some data. And then I really like baby steps. Vulnerability can simply be, as I just mentioned, sharing something I'm working on. Like, that is not that hard. Like, I can say, I am working on XYZ. That's a first tiny little step. And I'm not telling you about my issues at home and the challenge that I have with my kids, with my teenage boys. No, that's not what we're talking about. And it's also important to state that, this looks different for everybody. That's why I like to say leadership is a thinking person sport. You and I, Andy, we might share very quickly lots of depth, but with other people, it's less depth, but it could still be meaningful. So we need to read the room. Some people are really comfortable going deep, and others are not. So,
yeah. I like what we're kind of circling around here in the concept of vulnerability. One of that kind of situational awareness that comes from adopting and working on vulnerability. Once you go there, once I started going there and working on vulnerability, I very quickly realized that everybody that I was talking about had their shit. Pardon to my listeners for swearing there, but everybody's walking around with a backpack full of stuff, and you don't know what's in that backpack, and you've got your own backpack that you're carrying around, and the concept of grace then comes from that, and affording people just a little bit more grace. That's what I found came from doing that work myself.
Absolutely. And, everybody admires perfection from a distance and nobody can relate to it. It's so true, right? And so I think that's exactly right. We all have our stuff. And when we start to actually share a little bit, then then, the vulnerability loop starts, right? I share something, you pick that up, you share something in return. The relationship becomes more trusting and deeper. And again, I go back to, if the leader is resistant, like, what are you trying to achieve? Like, you don't have to be vulnerable if you don't want to deepen relationships. And by the way, vulnerability is one way to deepen relationships. There's other ways, of course, but it's probably the most challenging one for a lot of leaders, no question.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got 3 lightning round questions for you, Urs. If I asked you to define your purpose, why you exist, what would that be?
Oh, that's supposed to be a humble answer, right? Why do I exist I do believe, to bring this notion that we can achieve kick-ass, badass results and still be good humans to the world, to my clients, to people I interact with, and also live it in my personal life. I'm coming back to my parenting, like my teenage boys, like live it in my personal life as well. I think that's my purpose.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, second one, if I gave you access to a time machine and you could send a message to an earlier version of Urs Koenig, what would that message be, and what previous version of yourself do you choose to send it to?
I had to send it to my teenage, sort of, older teenager, young adult. And the message would be less self-centered, be more thoughtful towards your parents. Don't be such a jerk to your parents. And so, because now as a parent, I look back and, we go like, oh my God, like what did I put my parents through? So that would be more considerate towards your parents. And that would be the message to my younger self.
Oh, if only our underdeveloped frontal lobe would listen to that fantastic advice. I have the same advice to my 15-year-old self for sure. Urs, final question. We're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your journey of personal growth?
I love that question. And so I've been working too much over the last 3 years, writing the book and now speaking about it and publicizing it and being out there on the road. And I love it. And quite with a bit of vulnerability, quite frankly, my balance is out of whack. And so I'm a keen skier still. I ski mountaineer. I like to be outdoors. And I haven't done enough of that lately. And I've put stakes in the ground that actually now over Thanksgiving, I'm going to plan out 25 and I'm going to make some non-negotiable things happening by just putting them on the calendar so that they don't just get eaten up by yet another speaking engagement. So that's what I'm working on. My work, I hate that phrase, but my work-life balance is out of whack and I want to get back into balance.
I happen to have a book for you. It's my first book called Balancing Act.
All right. Absolutely.
Urs, where can our listeners find you and learn more?
Absolutely. So for my keynote speaking on the web, urskoenig.com, koenig.com. And then LinkedIn is the social platform I'm most active on. And I love to interact and hear from readers what they have to say and think about my book and my speaking and my work in general.
Excellent. Well, Urs, it's been fantastic to meet you. I'm so happy that we were able to connect. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
It was great. I had a lot of fun. Thanks, Andy.
All right. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your colleagues. The show was produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.